Taeseong admitted to himself that he could not become strong. He lacked talent, luck, and money, being just an ordinary person rather than an inferior one. However, Taeseong's master once stated that to defeat an enemy, it is not necessary to be stronger, but to make them weaker, asserting that one should kill them with a single blow without letting them survive a second. Thus, although lacking in talent, Taeseong possessed some useful skills like the Great Extinction Formation, which reduced the enemy's defense and magic capabilities, and the devastating weakening skill, which diminished their physical stamina and mana. Consequently, many enemies were defeated by Taeseong. New World Game is an online role-playing game played by many, specifically 2 billion players. It is set in the largest virtual reality open world in history, where human freedom is fully ensured with a vast and diverse world map covering 30 million km2. However, this is not just a game but another world. Taeseong started playing it primarily for money. He believed that playing the game was the best way to make money. And although he was only at a very basic level, he managed to get a job called Elemental Wizard. After the results of his insane efforts, Taeseong became the leader of the 200-member Beamer Guild. He made a substantial amount to support his daily life, realizing he had a knack for gaming despite lacking education or a good family background, truly proving that fate doesn't completely rob anyone. However, a powerful guild in the New World game called Genesis were villains who destroyed the guild that Taeseong had managed and built. He could not believe that there was such a power disparity between the two guilds, unable to accept that they had lost even when fighting properly. Taeseong had been gaming continuously for 47 hours, and although the system warned that this was impacting his daily life, Taeseong didn't know what else to do or where to go. If he logged out of the game now, he would just return to the damp room he was living in. To counter the Genesis Guild, Taeseong took on a debt of hundreds of millions of won and prepared expensive items, but due to the betrayal of his trusted teammates, he was defeated once again. All that was left in his inventory were 3 pieces of dried beef, a treasure map, and a tattered cloak. In the game, when Taeseong was pursued by the Genesis Guild, he fled into a forest. The heavy rain that obscured visibility along with the winding forest paths allowed him to shake him off. He slumped down at the base of a large tree, feeling desperate, unable to accept that despite his efforts and dedication, he always failed. At that moment, a man in black appeared. Knowing the young man's thoughts, the elderly man with silver hair and beard said that the big fish swallowing the small is a cruel rule, yet the weak being trampled is natural and complaining solves nothing. Then he laughed in Taeseong's face, seeing someone suddenly appear and mock him. Taeseong angrily stood up but still politely told the man not to worry about him as he didn't have time to talk to strangers. After that, Taeseong turned and walked away. However, from a tree, a man wielding a sword lunged at the elderly man. Taeseong only managed to shout a warning before a large explosion occurred. 2 members of Genesis approached from behind, mocking him because they knew that in the real world, Taeseong was in significant debt and thus could not log out of the game. With that move, Taeseong only managed to block an attack for the elderly man and told him to leave because it was too dangerous there. He didn't even have a weapon to use. The man who attacked from ambush was Kim Jin-woo, the betrayer, whom Taeseong had once considered family, only to be betrayed by him in such a major way. He was also the one who had stolen Taeseong's weapon. Kim grabbed the weapon, a staff, and swung it towards Ki. The light from the staff grew into a large fire that shot forward just as everyone thought it was over. The old man from before stepped forward. He completely neutralized the recent attack and then swung his arms, causing dirt and rocks to fly up, and the 3 attackers were thrown back, getting caught in a whirlwind and then fallen hard to the ground. Taeseong was just as surprised when he activated an ancient language to comprehensively assess the elderly man and discovered that he was merely a passerby of the human race, yet had reached level 999. Seeing Taeseong's astonishment, the old man turned back, smiled, and mentioned that he had been observing him for quite some time. Taeseong was even more surprised that someone like him without talent, money, or even luck could attract attention. At that moment, Taeseong received a notification of an epic quest to accept the old man as his master, but he was warned to be sincere or else he would be killed by him. Without hesitation upon seeing the quest, Taeseong bowed deeply, thanking the man for saving his life and asking to be taken as a disciple. The man, who did not refuse, introduced himself as Deus. Taeseong changed his title in the game from Elemental Wizard to Disciple. Deus extended his hand, promising to lead him on the path to becoming invincible. He used a teleportation spell to take Taeseong to the Kunlun Mountains. Deus led him to a purifying water pond that would cleanse his body of impurities. He briefly and boldly stated his intention to train Taeseong in a short-term course lasting 99 days. Not wanting to talk further, Deus let Taeseong fall into the pond, and as he submerged, he thought he would drown but found he could breathe underwater. The system then warned that a severe pain would soon begin, and before Taeseong could prepare, his body felt like it was trapped in a time warp enduring for an hour. Despite hearing Ta Seong's struggles, Deus did not rescue him but remarked that Tae Seong was very strong. In the real world, Tae Seong felt immense pain as if every cell was being burnt. He wanted to log out of the game, but memories of being bullied in the past resurfaced, making him stop. He didn't want to run away anymore until finally the time ended. Ta Seong emerged from the water, crawled to the shore. The system continued to announce that his level had reached 201 as the purification process had been successfully completed an hour earlier. He was once a nobody with chaotic stats, but now Deus had reset his level, helping him overcome all of his physical weaknesses and maximizing his potential. In other words, if another person receives 1 mana, Tae Seong can receive 1.2 mana. If the standard is at level 100, then when others receive 100 mana, Tae Seong will receive 120 mana. Discovering this, he bowed deeply in gratitude to his master, who mentioned that in the remaining 99 days, this process would repeat 100 times and that Tae Seong needed to practice more, after which Deus departed. At the same time, in the United States at the headquarters of the company that produced New World Game, it was noted that Epic Code 07 had been activated, meaning that Deus had taken a disciple. The employees were surprised and curious about who the lucky professional gamer was, but were disappointed when they found out it was just an ordinary gamer. The vice president of the company, Oppenheimer, approached the screen and looked at the image of Tae Seong, wondering how long he could last in the game. Tae Seong has undergone several rigorous training sessions and has finally completed 3 months. On a snowy day in the Kunlun Mountains, both master and disciple were in a house drinking tea together, marking the 99th day of training that would end today. Ta Seong felt quite regretful about leaving the mountain. However, he thought that ending these hellish training days was enough. Deus had also experienced a similar period, having once pursued supreme power, obviously not being a weakling like Tae Seong. 8 years ago, there were 8 great warriors on the continent, with Deus being the last standing, desperately wanting to defeat those stronger than him. To achieve this, Deus spent his time in the Kunlun Mountains cultivating, and though he was able to grasp supreme power, he still couldn't compete with them. After 500 years, those old men had all died. A long period of cultivation made Deus lose track of time, but it also meant that the enlightenment he gained was not in vain. At this point, Deus pulled out a notebook and threw it in front of Tae Seong. He said that being undefeated was a power that made one invincible, a kind of power that could win against anyone and anything, and that it was not necessary to become stronger, but to make one's enemies weaker than oneself. This was the enlightenment that Deus was speaking about, found in the Master Manual of the Debuff Master. The system announced that Tae Seong had successfully transitioned from Disciple to Master of Debuff. His nickname was changed from his real name to Siegfried. In the game New World, nicknames can't usually be changed, but Deus could change even the game's system's rules. He said that since Tae Seong was his only disciple, he needed a name that reflected that. This change made Ta feel as if he was reborn, now possessing the power to defeat the Genesis. Deus assigned him a mission to defeat the 7 descendants of the powerful rivals he once faced. Ta Seong fully agreed and promised to use the skills his master had taught him. As soon as he finished speaking, Deus teleported him down the mountain with a beam of pink light. In the western territories of the continent, Birman Domain, Tae Seong was walking in the forest. His current level was 1, and with his current state, he was still too weak to face the Genesis. The urgent matter now is to level up at least 100 levels without hindrance. Ta Seong sat still and reviewed all of his skills, some of which were so powerful that he had to read them over and over again, such as the devastating weakening skill that could reduce the enemy's defense and lower their resilience along with a fairly high damage rate. Just then, a giant mutated tiger, with a hamster in its mouth, charged towards him. The hamster, trapped in a tiny cage, was crying tears, begging Tae Seong as a human to save it. The system displayed a hidden mission notification to rescue the spirit, with an unspecified reward. It was suspicious that a high-level mutated tiger appeared in the beginner's area, which made Ta Seong cautious. However, he still decided to save the hamster, picked up a piece of wood, and charged at the tiger, utilizing his newly learned skills, Grand Annihilation and Devastating Weakening, to fight the monster. Although the battle did not last long, it was enough to make the great spirit hamster in the cage exclaim in awe. It did not expect a human who seemed so frail to not show any weakness when fighting the giant tiger. The hamster shouted to encourage Tae Seong, hoping he would win and rescue it from the cage. The tiger was very strong at level 25, and after being hit dozens of times, its health bar was still half full, while Ta Seong's mana and stamina were starting to decline and his weapon had reached its limit. He decided to deliver a powerful final blow to the enemy. The tiger, sensing Ta Seong's momentum, flinched in fear but instinctively raised its claws and lunged at him. Ta Seong swiftly dodged and then struck the beast with the piece of wood. Then a dazzling light flashed and numerous leveling up notifications appeared. The tiger was defeated, and he leveled up to 15. The hamster beside him screamed, asking Ta Seong to help it out of the cage, and once freed, it wanted to go exploring with him. Ta Seong disagreed, turned to leave, but the mouse ran up, clutched at Ta Seong's leg, and wept bitterly, begging him to take it along because its memories had been completely erased, and it currently had no strength left at all. Ta Seong felt a disdain for this pet, unable to comprehend why others enjoyed keeping pets. The reward notification for rescuing the Great Spirit turned out to be a contract with it. However, upon reconsidering, he heard that even though the Great Spirit was a hamster, its rank was equivalent to a Spirit King, which might not seem special now, but could be quite formidable once it regained its strength. Reluctantly, Ta Seong signed a contract with the hamster and allowed it to accompany him. After the contract was agreed upon, the creature cleared its throat and introduced itself as Prometot Cactus Hydra Levi. Feeling the name was too lengthy, Ta Seong renamed it Hamzy. The hamster was shocked but had no choice but to accept the new name. Ta Seong asked why it was trapped in the cage, but even the hamster didn't know. When it woke up, it was already in that dire situation with no memory of how it got there. The only thing it could remember was its name. Together, the man and the mouse headed towards a village ahead, where they met an equipment officer of the mercenary guild. Ta Seong wanted to obtain a mercenary license as it was necessary for leveling up. The officer mentioned that acquiring a license would require a bit of qualification assessment. The first task was to eradicate a commonly seen mutated rabbit in Bierman territory. Without saying much, Ta Seong produced a tiger fang he had obtained from the recently defeated mutated tiger. The officer was startled, recognizing it as a fang from a mutated tiger known for its hardness and durability, typically used as a material for lower-grade weapons. He carefully stored it and led Ta Seong to issue the license, eventually handing him a badge. The officer also mentioned that lately, mutated monsters had been unusually swarming the area, even attacking the local farms, which terrified the villagers. He added that the frequency of monsters lingering around the village had increased, and the mutated tiger Ta Seong had defeated was a creature not normally seen in Bierman territory. Besides the tiger, mutated wolves and cattle were also threatening the area. Hearing this, Ta Seong nodded, understanding why he encountered a level 25 monster upon his arrival. At this point, the officer appeared very worried and hoped that Ta Seong would help them eliminate the mutated beasts. A notification popped up with a new mission: protect the Bierman territory, with a reward of 100 gold. Ta Seong scratched his head and accepted the officer's request, promising to do his best. After leaving the permit issuance place, Ta Seong was equipped with a set of armor and a weapon. The hamster chimpanzee beside him was busy eating magic crystals, skillfully spending Ta Seong's money. Ahead, 3 individuals appeared, moving towards them. These people were to join Ta Seong's team to complete this mission. The fat man walking in front named Jang Man Bok, and the 2 behind him were Thompson and Rosie. As the previous employee had mentioned, there would be other mercenaries fighting alongside them, so Ta Seong did not feel burdened. These 3 appointed him as the team leader, as he was the strongest, while the others were novices. Rosie asked what they should do next, and Ta Seong suggested they start at the Bukardi farm, where the situation was reported to be the most severe. At the farm, they fought against a pack of mutant wolves. While they were all extremely tired, a giant mutant cow charged at them. While the others thought about escaping, Ta Seong decided to confront it and struck the enemy with a deadly blow. Liyun the cow baffled as to why it died. Ta Seong leveled up to 20. All the mutant beasts had been killed, with none daring to advance, and no one was severely injured except for the other 2 who had superficial wounds. Ta Seong planned to finish off the remaining beasts, but they suddenly seemed to hear a strange signal and fled in the same direction, as if obeying a command to retreat. A new mission linked to the task of protecting the territory appeared, which was to investigate the cause of the mutants creating a wave of monsters. Seeing the others were injured, Ta Seong told them to rest while he would explore further. Being injured, the 3 did not rely on their strength but thanked him and supported each other back to their tent. Ta Seong followed the footprints of the monsters into the forest, and upon reaching the edge, he saw the Schreier territory stronghold. However, it was strangely deserted, looking like a wasteland as the Iron Gate opened, letting out a horde of mutant beasts led by the legendary Golden Goblin that appears every 100 years. It was a dark elf lord capable of manipulating the minds of other mutant beasts. Fortunately, the goblin did not detect Ta Seong's location. Upon discovering the cause, Ta Seong decided to return to the tent since he couldn't handle the situation alone. Back at the camp, he met with the commander of Bierman, Bleach, who had already heard of Ta Seong's deeds. They quickly got to the main point over a large map. The cause was the dark elf lord who had controlled the mutants using his mind-manipulating powers and destroyed the stronghold. Now they would target this territory. Ta Seong suggested evacuating the lord and the people, then focusing on blocking the mutant assault. However, defeating the dark elf was difficult, and despite their resentment, they had no better option. Ta Seong proposed that Bierman give him some time to level up before returning to fight the creatures. The plan was simple. First, form a special operations team with agile members to use guerrilla tactics to trim down and scatter the mutants, then lure the scattered mutants towards Ta Seong. He knew what he had to do next. He aimed to reach level 30 and then join forces with everyone to fight the Dark Elf, although the elf was level 50. Commander Bleach was worried because Ta Seong was 20 levels behind the Dark Elf. However, Ta Seong was not afraid, likening this mission to the time he caught a level 20 mutant tiger when he was only level 1. Even if he failed, the result would still buy time for reinforcements to arrive. The commander could not stop Ta Seong, and they had no other choice but to try. Outside the tent, the hamster sprite asked Ta Seong why he was keeping secrets from the commander. Surprised by the sprite's understanding, Ta Seong explained that reaching level 30 could grant him a new skill, which would be very useful in confronting the enemy, though it did not guarantee 100% victory. He kept this skill hidden because he did not want to reveal it yet, as the other normal players might panic if they saw such a powerful skill. Just then, two of Ta Seong's teammates approached and told him to rest for a while. They had been playing for 14 hours, and combat time was in 2 hours. Before logging out of the game, Ta Seong handed a golden egg to the hamster and instructed it to use it to buy food. The greedy great sprite quickly grabbed the money and ran off without a word. After logging out, Ta Seong lay down on the floor, reflecting on the events that had occurred over the past few months. Initially, his guild was destroyed and he became a fugitive. Then he met his master and gained the profession of a debuff master, and now he was fighting to save the territory. He had once played the game for revenge and money, yet now he was enjoying it purely for its own sake. Afterwards, Ta Seong slept until the afternoon. At the door, there was a call from a technician there to install a capsule. Surprised as he hadn't ordered this, the technician confirmed the address and Ta Seong's name, mentioning a congratulatory message for his profession. This was a gift from the New World game, asking him to receive the goods and help set up the installation. Downstairs, a stranger was on the phone with the director of the New World company. It turned out that the director had gifted the capsule to Ta Seong, considering him a colleague. In Ta Seong's house, he walked around the capsule chair, thinking it was recognition for his hidden profession. Ta Seong immediately sat in it to test it out, entering the game. The capsule provided a comfortable embrace of his body, and even with VR, his mind felt clear and alert, with a much more realistic sensation than before. However, he suddenly smelled burning and scorching. Just as he entered the game, he discovered a vast fire engulfing the skies red. A large fire was raging there. Flames enveloped the city of Bierman. The citizens and soldiers were being slaughtered by the mutant goblins. Helpless to resist, due to their overwhelming numbers, their screams horrifying to hear. Even Hamzy was being chased by a mutant wolf. It ran frantically on 3 legs, but eventually its strength was depleted, unable to run any further. Just as Hamzy thought its life as a great sprite was about to end, Ta Seong rushed to the rescue. After being saved, Hamzy looked at Ta Seong's heroic figure and silently wept, then ran up and clung to Ta Seong's face. Immediately, Ta Seong pulled the hamster away and asked what was happening. As soon as Ta Seong and his team returned to the real world, the goblins led a mutant assault that had apparently been prepared in advance. The territory was under attack and was beyond saving. Currently, Ta Seong was the only adventurer left standing. He had just woken up and was feeling fortunate. He then gave Hamzy a task. In a ruined corner ahead, 3 soldiers were defending 2 women and a girl from a pack of mutant wolves. They had managed to evacuate many people, but had missed these 3. A goblin raised its claw towards a soldier, who thought his end had come. But a flash of light erupted, and Ta Seong delivered a fatal blow to the enemy. His weapon still glimmered with residual light as the goblin fell dead. He told the 3 soldiers to lead the people to counterattack, insisting that he alone was enough to deal with this enemy. The soldiers looked at him doubtfully, but understanding his resolve from his steady gaze, they handed something to Ta Seong and left to evacuate the civilians. Ta Seong plunged into battle with the monsters, feeling an intense clarity about his enemies that he hadn't experienced in a long time. He was fighting not just mutant wolves, but also smaller goblins, his speed and agility amplified to the fullest, his eyes flashing purple, a sign of his elite gamer status. The new capsule chair made movements more distinct and visible, although his reflexes had already improved from his master's training. Now he could dodge any attack effortlessly. The wealthy players weren't powerful without reason. Surely they had access to such high-quality equipment. He continually leveled up and had reached level 22, having killed many enemies but only gained 2 levels since level 20, as leveling up had become more challenging. At that moment, Hamzy arrived, having successfully lured a vast number of goblins as per Ta Seong's command. Ta Seong needed to level up quickly, so he hastened to kill as many as possible. Meanwhile, the Goblin King and Commander Bleach were engaged in battle elsewhere. He was trying to buy as much time as possible for Ta Seong to level up, and despite his many injuries, he continued to fight the goblin tenaciously. The Lord of the Stronghold lay beneath the claws of the Goblin King, the goblin's weapon poised over his neck, indicating that they were in a dire and disadvantaged position. The mutated beasts finally perished at the hands of Ta Seong, who, 30 minutes earlier, had assigned Hamzy the task of luring the goblins to their location and inquiring about the whereabouts of the Goblin Lord. Meanwhile, The small hamster scurried, losing its pants in the rush to gather the goblins. When it caught sight of Batman's city, it sensed an eerie and malevolent energy emanating from within the city. Although it couldn't see inside, it was certain this energy stemmed from the Goblin Lord, but neither the Lord nor the General Bleach were visible. Aware of the dire situation, Ta Seong immediately set out to search for them, with Hamzi unwilling to face the ordeal alone and following suit. Arriving outside Bierman City, Ta Seong too felt a disturbing mana presence within. Perched on Ta Seong's shoulder, Hamzi asked if there was a battle plan, noting that despite his master's strength, they were facing the Goblin Lord and strategies would be essential if attacked. Recognizing Hamzi's point, Ta Seong still felt pressed for time and sometimes believed charging in without a plan was the best course of action. He smashed through the city gates and charged in to find General Bleach leaning against a pillar, panting heavily and severely weakened from losing his right arm. Before Bleach could speak further, the Goblin King entered weapon in hand, taunting Ta Seong and accusing him of causing the Bierman people's deaths as a ploy to strengthen himself, claiming their sacrifices were a foolish weight. Bleach shouted, urging Ta Seong to ignore the Goblin's manipulations, insisting they were only doing what they had to do. Enraged yet composed, Ta Seong noticed the Lord behind the Goblin. He stashed his weapon behind his back, which made the Goblin gloat, thinking Ta Seong had become agitated and lost his senses over guilt. Ta Seong then activated his skill to master the speed, slowing down the enemy's movement and attack speed. The Goblin swung and missed, allowing Ta Seong to lift the Lord over his shoulder and deliver a powerful counterattack. The Goblin King was discomforted, hating the feeling of being restrained, as if thousands of chains were binding him. Ta Seong managed to retrieve the arm of General Bleach. Although it couldn't be reattached, it was vital not to let it fall into enemy hands. He acknowledged that it was only through everyone's support that he was able to become stronger, leaving the rest of the matter in his hands. Ta Seong instructed Hamzi to lead them out of there as he prepared to confront the Goblin Lord. The Lord was furious, feeling belittled by Ta Seong's peculiar skills and vowing to tear him limb from limb before killing him. Having addressed all concerns, Ta Seong then initiated a true test of strength, a game of power. The Goblin Lord, also known as the Goblin King, was a giant, twice the size of Ta Seong. Despite being bound by invisible chains that Ta Seong conjured, the king was still able to strike at will, though with some difficulty. Ta Seong was surprised at how well the goblin could keep up with his speed mastery skill. The Goblin King's eyes were fierce, and his mouth spat out scornful words, swearing to dismember Ta Seong and offer him as a sacrifice on the altar of the war god, before chopping his head into pieces. Ta Seong struggled to rise, not perturbed by the goblin's potential to overcome his support skill, because it was not an offensive skill. Moreover, he lacked the mana to use other skills and debated whether to use another particular skill, eventually deciding to reserve it for another time. The two continued clashing their weapons, creating deafening sounds accompanied by flashes of skill lights. The Goblin King gained the upper hand, knocking Ta Seong down and stepping on him, causing Ta Seong to cough up blood. The Goblin King hated humans because, since ancient times, humans had considered goblins a weak species. He acknowledged that goblins were not a superior race but vowed to change that. One day, he believed goblins would dominate the world, standing above all other creatures. This was the heavy responsibility borne by Goblin Kings, and such was the ideal of the Goblin King. Hearing the Goblin King's ideals, Ta Seong sneered mockingly, asking the goblin if he knew why, after generations, their kings were still mere dogs to humans. He scornfully suggested that it was because they were a lowly, filthy species, and advised the goblin to take a bath to rid himself of the stench. Enraged, the Goblin King gripped his weapon tighter and pressed down harder on Ta Seong. Recognizing the right moment, Ta Seong canceled his speed control skill, causing the goblin to feel unexpectedly light. Seizing the opportunity, Ta Seong knocked the weapon from the goblin's hands and launched a series of strikes with his own weapon. The Goblin King, taken aback, whistled for a mutated tiger that he had painstakingly researched to manipulate psychologically. The tiger, swinging its claws, knocked Ta Seong back, demonstrating the power that the Goblin King had developed to control the minds of any beast. As the tiger advanced to attack, Ta Seong retreated but was unable to escape completely and was slammed to the ground. At this moment, Ta Seong activated a high-level skill known as Contempt for the Mighty. This skill increased the damage he inflicted and reduced the damage he took, essentially making him a master of debuffs. Unlikely to lose now, Ta Seong turned the tide. With the dawn breaking over Bierman Fortress and the Goblin King's death, the mental control of the other monsters was broken and the remnants were completely eradicated. Those who were slightly injured were gathered to rebuild the realm. Ta Seong sat on the side, drinking a potion to restore his strength, reflecting on how such experiences were unimaginable in real life. He was still in disbelief that he had single-handedly defeated a powerful Goblin Lord. Had he not had enough mana to use Contempt for the Mighty at that critical moment, he would have surely perished. Of all the skills he had learned, this one was incredibly game-changing, though its long cooldown required careful usage. General Bleach called Taesiong out for a talk. Taesiong inquired about Bleach's well-being and suggested he rest more. Bleach explained that it was stuffy inside the tent and mentioned he had just received an order from the Lord to escort Taesiong to the castle. As they walked and talked, Bleach mentioned that the Lord had also been injured. If Taesiong had arrived even a bit later, it wouldn't have likely been fatal. However, the Lord was currently receiving treatment and was recovering well. Despite his external appearance, the Lord was a very robust general. Taesiong apologized for not arriving sooner, acknowledging that if he had, perhaps the Lord wouldn't have lost his arm. Bleach dismissed the concern, expressing gratitude to Taesiong, stating that without him, they would have lost their land and that the arm was a small price to pay for protecting their domain. Taesiong admired Bleach, seeing him as a true knight. Upon meeting Taesiong, Baron Wegman, the Lord of Bierman Domain, shakily praised his name as befitting a hero and thanked him for saving the domain. As he attempted to bow in gratitude, his frail body stumbled and he collapsed. Those nearby quickly assisted him, and Taesiong glanced nervously at General Bleach. The Lord sat down and continued the conversation, emphasizing that it didn't matter in what capacity Taesiong had helped, but his willingness to risk his life to protect the domain was what had brought peace and beauty back to it. The Lord then mentioned he had a gift for Taesiong, something significant, hinting at its importance. They proceeded inside, where the Lord presented a box, describing it as a treasure created by his ancestors who were collectors of antiquities. Though most of it was lost or sold and barely anything remained, there was still something that could truly be called a treasure. He handed it to Taesiong, who opened it to find a golden beam of light emanating from it. It was a token from the Mercedes workshop. In the history of the Nuremberg continent, a place where magic, alchemy, and metallurgy flourished, these techniques evolved over thousands of years, becoming so interconnected that the boundaries between them blurred into a fusion phenomenon. Among these techniques emerged a synthesis, known as a creation combining magic, alchemy, and metallurgy. The emergence of super-scale workshops dedicated solely to these creations included Autonica, known for its technological prowess, Bimerian, recognized for its destructive power, and Mercedes, celebrated for its supreme strength. These workshops were regarded as the best, collectively known as the three great houses of the continent. Among them, the Mercedes voucher was highly prized as a reward for the mission to eliminate the Goblin Lord. This voucher allowed any item to be enhanced up to 12 times consecutively, with a 100% success rate, without any level restrictions. 700 years ago, when the Mercedes workshop first opened, it struggled financially as a new establishment. In a desperate measure, they sold these discount vouchers for just 1,000 gold. At that time, 1,000 gold was still considered a hefty investment for a new workshop, and Mercedes was disregarded, much like a money pit. Count Graham, an ancestor of the Lord, supported Mercedes when others ignored it, not knowing whether he saw potential in the future or merely liked collecting oddities. It turned out to be one of his best investments. Nowadays, the voucher is worth tens of millions of gold, but for Lord Bierman, it was a leaderless treasure. Initially, he intended to bequeath it to a descendant with the qualities of a strong leader, but there was no one suitable. His son was an excellent heir but lacked the capacity. Therefore, Lord Bierman had a special request for Taesiong. He mentioned that when he regained consciousness, he remembered seeing Taesiong's strong and determined eyes while fighting the Goblin King. Thus, he was certain Taesiong would become a hero who could shake the continent. He hoped that if Taesiong became a hero, he would assist his son in the same way that the Lord's ancestors had. The Lord might not know much, but he recognized Taesiong's bravery and courage. Taesiong did not refuse when the Lord made this request. He took the golden voucher and agreed to help the Lord's son. A new mission was then announced by the system, to repay the gratitude to Bierman Domain and assist today, eventually going to the capital to establish relations with the Count's son, with reputation as the reward upon completion. Taesiong, holding a golden card, went outside, unsure what to do with it. He knew selling it could pay off his debts and even buy a mansion for his mother. However, if his master found out, he would surely scold Taesiong for being foolish and short-sighted. Shaking his head, Taesiong then stored the card in a space. Looking around, he noticed that Hamzi was nowhere to be seen. Curious, Taesiong wondered what the mouse had been up to all day, possibly getting into some unusual mischief. Elsewhere, in a wooden house, Hamzi was shaking its smooth, furry tail in front of everyone, attracting a crowd that admired the squirrel for its cuteness. Hearing this, the mouse angrily shouted that it would not perform for free. The man who had just complimented it laughed and handed over a reward, a walnut. Delighted, Hamzi quickly took the walnut, thanking Q and suggesting that he watch it pretend to be its foolish owner Taesiong for entertainment. Nearby, Taesiong, overhearing everything, looked grim and coldly lifted the mouse by the tips of his fingers, scolding it. Despite its resistance, Hamzi retorted that if Taesiong wouldn't feed it, he should leave it alone and called for Q to save it. Taesiong thought Hamzi only ate magical stones, but in reality, the mouse ate normal food too, only resorting to magical stones when it was depleted of energy. When Q saw Taeseong approaching, he invited him to sit and inquired whether he had received his mission reward yet. After hearing that Taeseong was about to go, Q slapped him on the back, praising him for the unprecedented amount of rewards. At that moment, a man, Jericho, approached, holding a bag of money he had just received, tears of joy running down his face. He had thought he would perish in the battle, yet now he not only survived but also received a reward. Taeseong, puzzled, asked Jericho if he knew where the Goblin King's body had gone since it was nowhere to be seen. Jericho replied that it was at Lake Bierman, where the Lord had displayed it to deter anyone thinking of escaping, mentioning that the corpse had been gruesomely mutilated. In his thoughts, Taeseong considered Lord Wegman to be more ruthless than he had initially thought, and he was unsure if he should leave this place. Although he had only been in Bierman for a short time, he had learned many new things. Taeseong thought that perhaps his master knew this place would be beneficial to him, which was why he had been brought here. As the saying goes, speak of the devil, and he shall appear. This was followed by the arrival of a muscular man. He wasn't Taeseong's master, and though Taeseong didn't know him, the man recognized Taeseong as his disciple. Taeseong activated his vision to assess the man before him, who was a level 361 Sword King and one of the 5 heavenly stars. The man named Betelgeuse boasted that he could split a kingdom with a single strike. The 5 heavenly stars is a term representing 5 stars in the Nurburg continent's sky, used as titles for masters who have reached the pinnacle in their fields. Betelgeuse was a genius, and in this remote wasteland, many talented individuals emerged. He wanted to take Taeseong as his disciple, thinking that Taeseong, being the newcomer, might not understand the 5 heavenly stars and the sword masters, so he intended to explain. However, Taeseong fully understood and interrupted him, stating that he already had a master who was even stronger than Betelgeuse. To reject this offer, Taeseong claimed his master was invincible. Hearing this, Betelgeuse laughed heartily and slammed his sword into the ground. A blast of blue light knocked everyone nearby off their feet, sending them flying. Taeseong also fell, clutching Hamzi in his arms. Although Betelgeuse no longer considered taking Taeseong as his disciple, he wanted to make a deal with him instead. A new mission was established. Since his youth, Betelgeuse had walked the path of the strong with a sword in hand. The result of many years of grueling training that flayed the skin from his body was that at the age of 120 he finally achieved the master level he had always desired. However, deep in his heart, Betelgeuse felt an emptiness rather than happiness. Wondering what this emptiness was given that he had achieved what he wanted, he questioned why he felt so dissatisfied. He thought it might be due to a psychological transformation. But when he saw a master teaching his disciple, Betelgeuse realized he wanted to take a disciple himself. Even perfect skills would become meaningless once he died, so Betelgeuse needed a disciple to inherit his skills. He traveled across the continent searching for a successor, but although some had great mana, they lacked combat skills, and others were physically strong, but that was their limitation. By the time he was 130 years old, Betelgeuse felt the urgency of the situation because cultivating a suitable successor would take at least 20 years. At this rate, he feared he would die and his lineage would be lost. He searched everywhere, and the last place left was the Bierman territory, determined to find someone there, even if it was a stray sheep. The moment he saw Taeseong, he knew this proud man must become his disciple. Taeseong's urgent mission was to win a bet against him. If he lost, he would become Betelgeuse's disciple. Reluctantly, Taeseong agreed to the deal, and the mission was to defeat Betelgeuse. He gave Taeseong a chance, whether by physical attack or magic, stating that if he sustained even the slightest injury, the victory would be Taeseong's. Betelgeuse, considering his current vulnerabilities, decided to limit his mana use and rely solely on his bare hands. Confident in his robust physique, Betelgeuse laughed heartily. Taeseong, unimpressed, asked if he even knew his name. Betelgeuse, feeling unimportant, admitted he did not know, suggesting he didn't care about Taeseong as a person, but merely needed a tool to pass on his skills. Taeseong then chose to use his great annihilation skill, combining it with a powerful strike and hurling magic at Betelgeuse, preferring death over becoming the disciple of such a person. As Taeseong charged, Betelgeuse found his reckless movement predictable, guessing that he would spread a debuff skill on a part of the body and aim to weaken it, which seemed easy to counter if he identified the debuffed area. However, Betelgeuse miscalculated. The ground around them erupted and flashes of light flickered, gradually fading away. The spectators buzzed excitedly as Q remarked that it was the first time he had seen Taeseong fight so earnestly. When the dust settled, the muscular figure of Betelgeuse was revealed, unconscious yet still standing, which surprised everyone. Taeseong had struck a critical spot, and although the move was not the most honorable, he felt no remorse. With this, the mission was accomplished. He had won the bet against Betelgeuse of the 5 heavenly stars, earning the highest reward possible. Afterwards, Taeseong took Hamzi to the location of the Goblin Lord's corpse, planning to extract some goblin blood to sell before Betelgeuse awoke. At the Sohoka ruins in the kingdom of Macallan, a popular hunting ground for adventurers levels 40 to 60, a monstrous level 500 creature named Python that appeared 30 years ago roamed. At the mercenary guild in Sohoka, a person named Gozran, a former elemental mage, was holding a sign to recruit support members for her team. Despite the presence of others also looking for team members, their efforts seemed futile. Just as she thought she wouldn't find anyone that day, she spotted Taeseong. Gozran activated her inside ability to discern Taeseong's profession, and she wanted him to join her team. After the incident in the Bierman territory, Taeseong still had a lot of real-world matters to deal with. However, those were minor issues now that he had paid off a significant amount of debt, specifically 200 million won to banks and 100 million from personal loans. Recently, he hadn't heard from any creditors, nor was there any news about them, which was good news since he hoped they would stop demanding payments. While walking down the street, Taeseong noticed a couple sitting in a very expensive-looking car. Despite earning a substantial amount from his recent quest, it was mostly luck, as a low-level player like him rarely received high-reward missions. The game world of New World was much like real life with its class distinctions. However, after reaching level 200, players received many quests with substantial rewards and rare items. Additionally, the Zeal Guild was known for supporting newcomers. With good mental and physical health, one could become a professional player, and if skilled in communication, even a streamer. For now, Taeseong only had a gaming chair, but he dreamt of eventually owning luxury cars, living in a lavish mansion, and marrying a beautiful wife. Lost in these thoughts while playing the game, he encountered Gozran. Noticing his distraction, she repeated her proposal that her team needed support and invited him to join if he wasn't already part of one. Taeseong guessed that she mistook him for a support player based on his profession and was about to decline when Hamzi suddenly yelled in agreement beside him, suggesting Taeseong didn't understand women and that Gozran was giving him a green light. The two argued in the bustling street, drawing the attention of the woman who was delighted by the sight of the cute pet. Taeseong suggested that he could only perform enhancement spells from the backline. Gozran quickly agreed, explaining they had enough attackers and he could simply relax and buff the team. Her sincere expression and earnest tone made it hard for Taeseong to refuse, and he finally agreed. In the western outskirts of the Sohoka ruins, once a flourishing urban area, this unfortunate city had become a heap of rubble 30 years ago due to the wrath of the Thunder Python. Although the creature was defeated, its powerful magic had seeped into the ground, giving rise to various other monsters. Gozran's team consisted of 4 people. A man in the group doubted Taeseong, noting his low level of just 31, but Gozran assured him that the main combat forces were sufficient, and Taeseong just needed to stay back and provide buffs, promising to protect him if needed. Suddenly, a creature swooped over them from behind, prompting the 3 to quickly duck. This was a monster born from the residual magic of the Thunder Python, a giant spirit-type lizard radiating a threatening presence. These creatures were numerous and aggressive, often attacking in packs. The golden light emanating from the creature forced everyone to squint as they prepared for the looming battle. As Gozran and Isti took central positions to hold the line, the other 2 members worked to fend off the pack of creatures. Gozran assigned Taeseong the task of enhancing the team with buffs from the rear. The lizards continued to unleash powerful streams of light from their mouths while the team members deftly combined shield maneuvers with swordplay to generate magic. While the rest struggled in the thick of battle, Taeseong stood calmly to the side, which sparked irritation among some, who thought he was merely there to leech off their rewards and experience. The situation intensified as one of the team members fell, surrounded by an increasingly dense swarm of monsters. When Gozran commanded a retreat, they realized the only path they had come by was now blocked. In her possession, she held 3 teleportation scrolls, but now there were 4 of them left. Gozran decided to sacrifice her own chance of escape to give the others the opportunity to survive. However, Taeseong stepped forward, insisting that the scrolls were too valuable and urged her not to sacrifice herself for anyone. Without hesitation, Taeseong then activated 2 devastating skills, Annihilation Debuff and Great Annihilation. A surge of purple energy enveloped the group, stunning everyone with its intensity and power. The spectacle left the team members with their eyes wide and mouths agape, in awe of the unexpected and overwhelming display of power. Taeseong simply activated a skill that buffed his team without directly attacking the monsters himself. However, bathed in Taeseong's power, his team was strong enough to battle against dozens of monsters. Although Taeseong only stayed behind and threw debuffs, he still earned a lot of experience as notifications of the experience points he was gaining kept popping up. While he was lost in thought, he was almost attacked by an outlying monster, but Gozran quickly blocked the attack. Taeseong noticed that this girl was quite agile. If she chose the assassin or rogue professions, her level might have been even higher. After the battle, everyone had leveled up, and those in the guild had grown to trust Taeseong more, showing him warmer attitudes. A girl in the guild mentioned that this was the first time they had seen a master of debuffs, suggesting it might be a hidden profession. However, Taesiong immediately countered that idea, stating that if that were the case, he would have joined a major guild by now. Taesiong explained to them that his was a unique profession, but he could only use debuffs and nothing beyond those effects. Each profession has 4 levels: common, legendary, mythical, and unique. Taesiong himself could not distinguish between these levels until his second job change. At that moment, Gozran handed him something yellow, explaining that these were items they had collected during the hunt as a gift for him. These were the lowest grade light crystals, storing weak light energy. Her group had kept all these things for the buffer after the hunting session ended. Taesiong accepted them, planning to stay with his team for the long term. A week had passed since Taesiong joined the team. At the Sohoka branch's explorers' rest stop, Gozran's team took turns resting. There were no special events or significant gains, but when Taesiong took on a quest from the Beerman domain, he leveled up safely and also unlocked a new auxiliary skill, achieving a minor milestone. Today, Taesiong took out the light crystal he had collected and activated its attribute absorption. This helped him absorb the light energy, enhancing his magic resistance. After reaching level 35, Taesiong received a new support skill, which was attribute absorption. It is a support skill that allows you to absorb attribute energy, which will enhance your attribute resistance, and if a certain amount is absorbed, can potentially boost that skill further. On the surface, it appears to be a simple skill that increases attribute resistance, but if a certain threshold of absorption is exceeded, it can enhance other skills as well. The problem is that Taesiong does not know how much this specific amount is. By the appointed time, he had leveled up to 44 and was set to learn a new skill called Arrow Flight the next day. The following morning, a crowd had gathered in front of the hotel, and when Taesiong stepped outside, they immediately rushed towards him, eager to form a new team. The pushing and shoving frightened Taesiong and Hamzi, making them step back. Gozran appeared from nowhere, pulling him away from the crowd, using a teleportation scroll to transport them both to a predetermined location, the Sohoka ruins. It turned out that Taesiong and his profession had become very famous because a video of Gozran's teen hunting had spread widely in the community. The person filming was likely Isti, who did not appear in this video and had left the team. Gozran thought he had secretly filmed it when leaving the area and uploaded it to a community site. Why he did it remains unknown, but it's certain that Esti had ill intentions. Taesiong thanked Gozran for rescuing him from the earlier situation, and now he planned to level up again before moving on to another place. After all that had happened, he did not think he could stay there as the rumor had spread too quickly. Although reluctant, Gozran had no choice, but when Taesiong was about to leave, she bit her lip and suggested forming a team with just the two of them. Taesiong did not refuse to form a private team with Gozran, although it was awkward. Seeing her hopeful face, he could not say no. Hamzi, overhearing this, affirmed that the girl was interested in Taesiong, teasing him and provoking Taesiong to angrily swat it to the ground. But this cheeky comment was very accurate, as Taesiong always managed situations well, except when it came to matters of the heart. Hamzi thought that its friend had regained its first skill, and Taesiong was curious to see what it was. Gozran also leaned in to observe the Divine Beast's skill, knowing that such skills do not appear easily unless it is a high-level Divine Beast. Gozran initially thought Hamzi was just a high-level pet, but when the mouse angrily explained that it was a great spirit, she squatted down, laughing and apologizing to it. Seeing her talking intimately with the mouse, Taesiong asked her directly why she treated him so well, wondering if it was because he was a good debuffer. Gozran replied that that wasn't entirely wrong, but initially, it was because she found his face quite attractive, though she quickly added that this was just a joke. In reality, her initial goal was to approach him for his skills, but now there was another, simpler reason. She was interested in him, not just as a master debuffer, but as the gamer Sieg. Gozran had noticed that he was a good person from observing how he conducted himself in battles over the past week. Taesiong had not only relied on his own skills, but had also carefully managed the positioning of everyone in the group, the condition of their items, and even their recovery potions. She had never seen a buffer take such meticulous care of team members. Taesiong chuckled, thinking this was just a habit from his time as a guild leader. Nevertheless, this was why Gozran was curious about what he was like in real life. While they were talking, an earthquake occurred, and an alert appeared that Taesiong was stunned for 5 seconds until he recovered. When he opened his eyes again, the surroundings were completely devastated, and Hamzi and Gozran stood next to him looking at him. Her shoulder was injured. A falling rock had hit her as she shielded Hamzi and Taesiong, thus getting injured herself. Before them lay the laboratory of the Ozric cult. Around them were numerous dead warriors and reptiles, suggesting that the appearance of a swarm of lizard spirits was related to this place. Gozran had never heard of such a dungeon in the Sohoka ruins, so this place might be a hidden dungeon. A hidden dungeon is like a secret dungeon or special dungeon where monsters and quests such as goblin lords appear. Taesiong thought that this meant the rewards would also be incredibly special, which made his eyes light up. Inside, a person was walking out who, after a few steps, collapsed to the ground, unconscious. Ta Seong and Gozran approached him and gave him a recovery potion. The man was a member of a secretive society called the Guardians, who had been sent along with others after hearing about a malevolent group in the Sohoka ruins, the Ozra cult. The cult members turned out to be stronger than he and his group had anticipated, leaving him with no choice but to flee. Despite his embarrassment, he pleaded with Ta Seong to stop the Ozra cult. Ta Seong asked him how he should go about it. The man explained that it was necessary to destroy 5 orbs in their research room. Failing to do so could once again trigger a catastrophe. Suddenly, 3 members of the Ozric cult charged towards them. Ta Seong drew his weapon intending to attack, but Gozran tried to stop him, thinking that as a buffer, he shouldn't be fighting. However, he was determined and told her to promise not to record or distribute any images or videos of what was happening here. Just then, a new quest notification popped up: stop the Ozric cult's scheme. The hidden quest was to destroy the energy orbs in the laboratory to thwart their plans. After defeating 3 opponents, Ta Seong successfully obtained the location of the laboratory. One of the 3 was very loyal. Ta Seong had to resort to torturing him before he would reveal the information. Gozran was quite surprised by Ta Seong, having thought that he was just a supportive background figure, unaware that he was concealing his true capabilities. Ta Seong promised that once everything was concluded, he would explain his actions to her. They then entered the laboratory. Located underground in Sohoka, this was the main base of the Ozric cult's laboratory. The high priest of the cult, Romulus, along with his subordinates, were killing innocent people. They held prisoners and murdered them for their righteousness. The blood of these prisoners stained the ground, surrounded by countless others sharing their fate. Romulus inquired about a prisoner who had just escaped, and a subordinate informed him that other guards were in pursuit. The members of the Ozric cult plotted to resurrect a demigod, though they were unaware that their plan might never succeed. Suddenly, the walls of the laboratory heated up and exploded into pieces. Ta Seong and Gozran kicked down the debris and stepped into the flames. Seeing them, Romulus, surprised, asked who they were and why the other guards had not stopped their intrusion. Noticing that the guards outside had fallen, he immediately began the resurrection ritual. Beams of light from the laboratory equipment shone directly onto the monstrous half-human, half-beast in the giant test tubes. A message appeared to Ta Seong instructing him to destroy 5 monsters within 5 minutes to prevent the boss monster from resurrecting. 1 monster had already been killed. The task was challenging due to the time limit. Ta Seong instructed Gozran to take out the remaining 4 monsters while he dealt with Romulus's men. Together, they charged forward, vigilant and agile. Ta Seong's swift and powerful moves ensured he was never at a disadvantage. After all the subordinates were defeated, only 2 strong adversaries remained facing each other. Romulus, realizing that he was not facing a weak opponent, recognized Ta Seong's strong fighting instincts and ability to assess situations effectively. However, Romulus was not alone. The souls of those whom had just fallen aided him in battle, for he was the high priest of the Ozric cult and derived strength from the presence of corpses. These souls, glowing with a pale blue light and possessing skull-like faces, exuded malice and ferocity. They pursued Ta Seong, forcing him to move forward. At a dead end, Ta Seong attempted to use his sword against the souls to no avail, as they were not immortal flesh. Though not physically painful, each time a soul passed through his body, his HP decreased. Physical attacks were completely ineffective against them, and if the battle dragged on, he was sure to lose. With only 3 minutes left, Ta Seong no longer wanted to fight the souls. He targeted their controller, Romulus. Ta Seong used his shatter skill in a direct attack on the high priest, but Romulus completely blocked it, even though the sword shattered. Seeing his weapon destroyed, Romulus relied solely on the souls. He gathered all the souls into a vortex and directed it at Ta Seong. Just then, a notification appeared. Ta Seong had reached level 45, enabling him to use his new skill, Phi Arrow. Without hesitation, a blue light arrow pierced through the layers of souls straight towards Romulus. All souls instantly vanished, and their master fell heavily to the ground, impaled by Ta Seong's weapon. Meanwhile, Gozran had killed 2 of the monsters, with 2 more to go. Cult members rushed towards her, trying to stop her. They tightly grabbed her blood-soaked arm, which was severely injured with only over a minute remaining. Ta Seong immediately rushed to rescue Gozran. He planned to use Phi Arrow to kill the remaining 2 monsters, but the skill's cooldown was 3 minutes. Thus, they split up, each taking on a monster. Normal attacks were ineffective. Only magic could harm them. With just 15 seconds left, Gozran raised her magic fire staff, and Ta Seong, standing behind her, acted as a buffer to support her. As the final seconds ticked away, they were about to defeat the last monster. However, life is not as one dreams. Romulus, thought to be dead, suddenly emerged at the crucial moment to block the attack. Time ran out and the mission failed. The monster boss was about to awaken. A dark yellow light illuminated the entire laboratory along with the appearance of the Thunder Serpent. The hidden mission was to defeat the resurrected Calamity. and the reward would be an item drop after defeating the monster. The Thunder Serpent had sharp spikes protruding backward from its back, and its tongue flicked out, menacingly threatening any nearby enemies with its 4 venom-coated fangs. Its enormous body could crush large stones with ease. Ta Xiong finally understood why the cult members sought to resurrect this particular serpent. Yet to him, this creature seemed rather small compared to the colossal serpents of ancient legends that encircled entire mountains. Although significant in size, being 20 meters long, this creature came from another world and had turned a thriving place like Sohoka into ruins overnight. Seeing that the serpent's level was 70, Gozran considered fleeing, but Taeseong chose to fight. Without questioning further, she handed him a potion that could resist elemental attacks and slightly recover his strength. Each took a bottle and continued the battle. The serpent was fast, using its swollen pain and tail for striking. With the advantage of a smaller body, Taeseong leaped onto a high rock and launched a frontal attack from behind the serpent's head. His grand annihilation and shatter skills combined with a triple strike inflicted a significant wound on the serpent. It immediately released an electric breath. Taeseong was thrown back by the blast, landing in front of Gozran. Despite being weakened, the hidden boss was still a formidable adversary. This Thunder Serpent had a vast attack range, and another attack, like the previous one, could bring down the entire laboratory. They needed to finish it quickly before it could strengthen. The serpent was protecting itself with an electric shield. Its body was covered in flashing yellow electric currents, significantly increasing its magic resistance. Touching the electric shield would result in an electric shock and paralysis. The creature was concentrating mana into its electric breath while simultaneously strengthening its shield to recuperate. Gozran, worried, asked Taeseong what they should do now as magic seemed ineffective and close combat would lead to paralysis. Taeseong used his ultimate annihilation thought strategy, depleting all the enemy's strength and mana. Indeed, the serpent could not withstand this. It went mad with pain, and the electric shield around it disappeared. Taking advantage of the moment, Taeseong charged at the monster, getting close enough to prevent it from unleashing its electric breath. He attacked physically while simultaneously using a speed control skill to slow down the enemy. He then combined this with a skill that allowed him to disregard the strong, increasing the damage he inflicted on his opponent and reducing the damage he received. A notification of mission completion appeared. The enemy was defeated. The Thunder Serpent lay decapitated, its head separated from his body. The reward was obtained from the corpse of the serpent. Taeseong had reached level 46, a modest increase that highlighted the difficulty of reaching level 200 quickly. Gozran ran over and both stared at the corpse of the beast, knowing that it typically required 5 level 70 players to defeat such a boss. However, a single level 45 had managed it alone, piquing her curiosity about Taeseong's capabilities. Taeseong, paying no attention to Gozran's thoughts, approached the corpse to check for any visible rewards. Borrowing Gozran's rubber gloves, he collected the serpent's blood, flesh, bones, and even its fangs. However, Taeseong was not satisfied with these items, finding them rather ordinary, except for the serpent's core, a substantial energy source from the creature's body containing a significant amount of light energy. If Taeseong absorbed the serpent's core, it would greatly benefit him, but there was only one and it couldn't be shared with Gozran. He proposed a trade where he would take the core, and she could have the rest of the items. Gozran covered her mouth and laughed. She explained that during their hunting expeditions, she often took the experience points while he received the physical rewards. This arrangement would be the same for this mission. Just being part of it was her reward. This was the greatest mission she had ever participated in, and she assured him she would never forget it. Taeseong was thoughtful, but decided to divide the items since he couldn't carry them all himself. At that moment, Hamzi, a mouse, appeared, showcasing its skill. It wore a tattered bag around its neck, but when opened, the bag revealed a vast space inside, far larger than it seemed. The magical bag summoned by Hamzi's skill was an item of the spirit realm, symbolizing the emptiness of the void world. Its capacity was infinite, allowing Hamzi to wear the void bag on its back and store items within. Taeseong was amazed by the capacity of the bag, a solution to the common issue of limited storage space. He now saw this little mouse had its uses. After resolving everything at the site, a stranger walked in. Taeseong couldn't sense his presence, and the man claimed he was not an enemy. Taeseong recognized him as the injured guard he had encountered outside the laboratory. The man transformed his appearance and revealed he knew Taeseong's real identity, Han Taeseong, and introduced himself as Qin Woo-jin. Even with ancient insight skills, Taeseong couldn't find any clues about him. This suggested a significant level gap that allowed Woo-jin to conceal his information. Taeseong was curious about Woo-jin's intentions. Why would someone approach him just to show off strength to a level 46? Woo-jin scratched his head, acknowledging Taeseong as the sole disciple of Deuce. Despite being only level 46, Taeseong's capabilities should not be underestimated. Taeseong felt uneasy that this person knew so much about him. Yet Woo-jin appeared amicable and claimed he was the only one who knew about Deuce. His heterochromatic eyes, one blue and one red, added to his mysterious demeanor. He told Ta Xiong to meet him in Sinsadong if he wanted to hear more, and disappeared. Ta Xiong worried that his identity had been exposed. Although Wu Jin claimed to be the only one who knew, Ta Xiong wasn't sure if other players or the Genesis Guild might also be aware. He had just started a new life and couldn't afford to end it abruptly. Gozrin, sensing Ta Xiong's distress, came over and held his face reassuringly. She declared that she hadn't heard anything and wasn't interested in spreading the word. She hadn't recorded or taken any screenshots, so there was nothing to worry about, and she would protect him if needed. Beside them, Hamzi also showed support, giving a thumbs up to Ta Xiong. After exiting the hidden dungeon, the team disbanded. Gozrin decided to stay in the ruins to level up while Ta Xiong logged out. In the following days, Ta Xiong hadn't logged back into the game New World, and despite his teammates' reassurances, he remained anxious. He received a message on his phone instructing him to meet M at a nightclub in Sinsadong the next day. Upon arriving at the Heaven nightclub, Ta Xiong was initially denied entry by the bouncer due to his casual sports attire, regardless of his reason for visiting. Some onlookers jeered at his outfit, heightening the tension. Just as a confrontation seemed imminent, M arrived and casually draped an arm over Ta Xiong, calming the situation. Recognizing M, the bouncer apologized and let them inside. Inside the club, amidst the pulsing music and chatter, the two made their way to a VIP area and opened a bottle of expensive champagne. While M was keen on celebrating, Ta Xiong wanted to cut to the chase. He questioned M about his identity and how he knew him. Over drinks, M explained that he had disguised himself as a guard and escaped from the Osric laboratory, ultimately faking his own death. Like Ta Xiong, M was also a member of a protective team and shared a similar hidden occupation. The reason for his disguise and test was to gauge the strength of someone who shared his secret profession. M revealed that the Genesis Guild, which Ta Xiong was wary of, was unaware of his true identity as a disciple of Deuce. This indicated that Ta Xiong's secrets were still safe. Ta Xiong pressed M about his own hidden agenda, but M responded that Ta Xiong was still too inexperienced to handle that knowledge. He assured Ta Xiong that to earn the full story, he must prove himself worthy of being Deuce's disciple.